Before I get started, don't forget the kickoff is live this Sunday, 4 o'clock for Arsenal versus Manchester United. When I looked at Havertz getting subbed off, there wasn't a lot contributed from him, in my opinion, and I'm still sort of wondering why they might have bought him. To me, that three-man midfield without Havertz and with Partey in there is better without Havertz.
Yeah, but I think in a big game, having Partey, Rice and Odegaard makes way more sense.
Yeah.
And I think when you're playing against these teams that are hard to break down, you need options against those teams. Where a lot of those smaller clubs, we were saying, like the West Ham game, the Southampton game, even the Everton game when Dyche's first game back in season last year, it was so clear that we just needed another approach and we didn't have it. And I feel like the thing I like about Havertz is that he's technically a very good player. And there's something in his head that's happened, and it happens often when you go Chelsea, that is, and that's not disrespect, it just is, that like you lose the edge that you may have. If Arteta can find it, there's a real player in there that gives us something different and can be dangerous. If he doesn't, we could find ourselves outside of the title race before we get our answer. I personally feel like right now, a Smith Rowe or just playing with that obvious centre midfield free would be way better than playing him, but I see what he's trying to do, and this is the best time to figure it out.
Would you say that Havertz is best role? And I'm not asking this in a way to get a reaction, but what is his best role?
So I feel like he's a second striker. So I think if you think about if we played 4-4-2, this is what I'm saying. Formation-wise, it doesn't necessarily add up. If you're playing a 4-4-2, you would play him as a second striker. In this modern era, those type of players don't necessarily have a home in these current formations.
They're a bit luxury, right?
They are. It's not that they're luxury. It's just that we just don't play in a place where he has the ability to be as impactful. The number 10 role disappeared, and we watched how quickly Mata and Ozil, who were amazing players 3 years before, declined incredibly quickly. He's a little bit of that.
Do you not think why, though? Because having that extra man in the midfield and winning the midfield battle just became so important. Like Newcastle today, we're playing basically 3 centre midfielders. There is no number 10.
Yeah.
We can't afford it.
I would say that Odegaard is a number 10, is he not? Like, does he not play in that creative role? Yeah, but he's not a defensive midfielder, is he?
No. Odegaard is 100% a number 10. There's no question about that. What I think the question is that what happens on the other side when we have more of the ball than not, having like a Rice and Partey, almost like a double pivot, or even one of them playing a 6 is overkill. So it's just like, what can we do? So one of them playing a 6, one of them playing an 8 is overkill. So what can we do to give a different type of midfielder in that space and then be able to play in the half spaces? That is what Havertz can do, but his mind has to be up to it. You can't just ask him to do it when he's come from a bit of a rough season at Chelsea into this new system. It's going to take him.
Remember though, he hasn't just come from a rough season at Chelsea. He also won a Champions League at Chelsea and then didn't do anything of note in the next season. I just think Arsenal fans are going to be... I think they're going to be waiting a long time for Kai Havertz to come good. I take it firsthand. He's not left and I'm bitter. We'll do better without Kai Havertz. It's one of those situations where you'll be waiting a long time to think, hold on, where does he actually play? And everyone says, yeah, but if you find his best position, okay, but then you're assuming that once you find that position, he's going to be a well beater all of a sudden. He hasn't done anything apart from individual moments like the goal in the Champions League final, but he hasn't done anything sustained to say that he's going to be a brilliant player even when you find the position he's best suited to.
I will say that if there is someone who's going to figure it out, it's Arteta. Or he just has to leave the country to go to a different
Do you think Arteta is more qualified to figure that out than a Thomas Tuchel who's won a Champions League than the sort of...
Yeah, they're completely different types of managers, and that's not even to say one's better than the other, but they're different types of managers. And I feel like this is what I'm saying, the kind of Pep Arteta mode of managing players and coaching them is completely different to the Mourinho Tuchel type of way of doing it. And I feel like there's certain players who just suffer in those type of environments, and there are certain types that absolutely will thrive at Arsenal. So I feel there is an opportunity that we can get into his head, and he'll have more safety in an Arsenal squad to find that than it will do in a Chelsea team or any other team. So let's see.
Question about Arsenal generally. What went wrong against Fulham?
I think it's just a bit of that. I think it's still figuring things out at a time when you would want us just to be home running. I think it just takes time to figure out how we're going to play this year to not be found out as much as we were last year. Because yes, we would beat a Fulham last year, but then somewhere in the team, just a team that's resolute, that's going to outrun us, we really struggled against and just be difficult. So we need another way of playing. And if you figure it out now, a bit like how Man City do, they played around with their team all the way up until December. And then from December, they turned into something else.
You're not as pissed off as I thought you would, because that, to me, Fulham, A, should be beating them at home, B, 10 men. And also, not just 10 men, but at 2-2, you nearly concede in the last minute when Traore goes through. Like, it was a lack of concentration. There were certain things that I can excuse not winning the game, but there's certain things that I'm like, this isn't like Arsenal last season. There was a switch off there. Do you disagree? Or
I just think the point that I want to talk to Marvin about is how Arteta is playing players in a position that they aren't necessarily comfortable with. Like, for example, you had Kivior playing as a left back. He's more of a centre back, is he not?
He's a left centre back.
Yeah. So fair enough, he comes in the 3. Partey's better in the defensive midfield area. He's playing right back. Trossard is playing up front, and I understand why, because Gabriel wasn't fit. But again, he isn't a striker. Kai Havertz is playing as an 8, and we've just, as we've discussed, we're not really sure how he's doing it. So that felt to me, when I saw that team sheet, it felt to me there was a few sort of square pegs in round holes.
I think one of the things is that us as football fans, and even the media as well, have this need to understand based on the traditional positions that are on the pitch. And I think Pep Guardiola has made it very, very clear that those rules do not exist. You are there to do a particular job against a particular team in a particular system at a particular time. So Fabian Delph being left back for ages is like clearly the most bizarre thing ever, but it worked for them for so long because he was doing a particular job. And I just feel like sometimes when we start talking about Arsenal, like Partey is not a right back. And it's just like, if you watch the game, he was never at any point at right back. As soon as we got the ball, we went into centre midfield and he was driving the play. And then when we were defending, he went back out there to defend. And that was it. It's such a, and the thing is, I think for us watching the game is that the game has evolved so much that even our own understanding of what we think we know, we have to readdress it. And actually the things that didn't work for Arsenal was that we had lapse in judgment on individual players, Zinchenko and Saka, which meant that we conceded goals, and that cost us at home, and it shouldn't happen.
It was just switch offs. Like, when you look at the first goal, everyone switched off. When you look at the corner that they scored from, no one marked their man. Like, it was really schoolboy defending.
But doesn't that ask the question that we're seeing the same mistakes that sort of, you know, made Arsenal unhinged towards the end of last season? Because that was what that was from. That was switch-offs. You know, against Southampton and against West Ham, you could say that was bad game management because you easily had the talent to beat both of those teams and were good enough to.
Like, if you send your players out and in the first minute they burst through, and this happened to us 3-4 times last year, and obviously happened to us this year, that's not an Arteta problem. That's the actual players on the pitch being the problem. And this is where I feel like what Arteta does need to do is be a lot more cynical with some of the players who aren't up it on the levels. And it's like Saka, even, it's like, if you're making that mistake, cool, but then you now need to go and fix that on your own. If I give you the ball one time, at some point you got to beat 2 people when you put it in the top corner. We don't think about that mistake.
Do you think the keeper was
that's your job? No, but I think it's he's a part of it as well, and I think that's why when Raya coming in is a really important thing. You need competition. Saka needs competition. He can't sit there and think every week I'm going to start because there's no one in my position.
I must admit, I was a bit like, priorities is another keeper. It's a bit of a Pep Guardiola move to put pressure on your own goalkeeper. Like, and some goalkeepers have came out and said it's a big mistake because once a keeper feels like you can't make a mistake, it's a different position at anywhere else on the pitch.
Yeah, but I think Ramsdale made mistakes last season at the end of the season also, just little errors when he's like clearing the ball out. He needed challenging in a way, and it's not always about coaching you with like, you can do it. Sometimes it's like, okay, look, I've told you what you need to do and what I expect from you. We have this person here in the wings, he's now here. No one was sitting there thinking Matt Turner's going to take over at any point, going to take over Ramsdale. So I think it's good. I think it's not just about timing and being like, oh, we should have got someone to put pressure on Saka first. It's what's available, what's on the market and what's realistic. So sometimes it's like, I'd rather deal with what's possible and rather than spunk a whole bunch of money on an attacker who really and truly won't challenge him. I'd rather try and energise Pepe.
It's a lot of money to spend on a replacement, on a backup. But what I will say is, Fulham looked really good, and that Paulinho,
Paulinho,
what a fucking player!
Top player.
I think one thing with Arsenal last season, I think everyone would agree it was a surprise that they finished second, especially where we had them at the start of the season. We perceived them to have bottled the Champions League spots a little bit the season before, so it was a surprise they finished second. And again, whenever I'm predicting stuff or whenever I'm trying to work out how things might go myself, I'm always looking into the past. I'll always look at things that have gone before, and I look at teams that surprised us by finishing second. Ole Gunnar Solskjaer's Man United team, he didn't last long after that. Mauricio Pochettino's Tottenham team, he didn't last long after that. Brendan Rodgers' Liverpool team, when Gerrard slipped, he didn't last long after that.
That's a good
so
point.
History would show that there are potentials that maybe that's the height Arteta goes to. And I know Arsenal fans that get their blood boiling by me saying it, but I'm just saying there is a chance that sort of thing could happen.
No,
We don't see
let's say in a year's time.
I don't think that's that wild.
In a year's time, if Arteta has got the chop, like just say for the sake of argument, we're all going to pinpoint that signing as that was where it all started to go wrong, right? Like when you bring in a player like that for that much money, it needs to go right. Like it's not like chump change, is it? So
no, but I think making that point isn't particularly crazy because it's based on historical data. What I'm saying at that particular time is I didn't see Brendan Rodgers at that time. It was still Mourinho and Pep. The question was he might be one of the big managers, but he never really delivered. And now he's back at Celtic, so it probably is never going to happen. But the reality is, I think with Arteta, he's a different type of manager. Like, and every single piece of feedback I've ever heard from any player that he's tried to sign, anyone that's worked under him says he's a different animal. Like, that's not what we were hearing from those managers at that time. So I feel that he will need to make these kind of mistakes as a manager. He probably was a bit idealistic in thinking Havertz is a technically brilliant player, and if I can get in his head, like dreaming a little bit, if this is the one time he dreams and gets it wrong, but after this he turns into a bit more of a savage, I'm here for it, because I think what happens afterwards, you start looking at players like Saka, Martinelli, and being like, either you're going to get me 25, 30 goals a season, or I have to find someone who's going to get it. Now you start talking about who's going to be there, who's going to compete with them. We really need a number 9, a proper one. We really need a new one.
Yep.
That's going to be a conversation, because that means Nketiah may not necessarily be here in a year's time. It means Jesus may not be here in a year's time. I feel like Gabriel has mistakes in him. So as much as we're saying we want him back in the team and don't go to Saudi, he has mistakes in him. So in that case, it's like, who should be there? Who's our Saliba number 2 to make us absolutely solid? Because Man City aren't playing. They got Stones and Guardiola. They're not playing around with
and you're just about to sell Balogun as well, aren't you? You know, he could have been a potential option there as well.
I feel like for Arsenal, they need to recoup some money to finish doing some work and to bring back the net loss down for the season. He's the only one of the few players that has resale value, which I think is the reason why. I think if someone put in a bid this morning for 45 million for Nketiah or 50 million for Nketiah, I think he might let Nketiah go before. Maybe I don't know. So I feel like it's a bit of a shame to lose him, because he clearly was on a good trajectory. But I trust them so much in terms of what they've done so far until it literally implodes and we're back where we were.
It's a bit like Newcastle.
Yeah, I think you have to. People don't understand how bad it was when we had Lacazette, Pepe, Ozil and Fajin Aubameyang up front, and we're looking at it being like, this could be as good as Liverpool. I remember, because we played Liverpool really early and we had them 3 up front, and it was against Mane, Firmino and Salah. We were like, they're basically the same. They could be as good. And the decline for all 3 of those players was so violent. Like I'm willing to prepare. I'm prepared to just allow Arteta to do his things, but please stop making decisions that we feel we could be picking up points, because Man City are probably coming back being better than ever.
To give him credit, before we move on, Vieira looked great when he came on.
Yep, he did.
Changed the game.